the mid-1990s, in the tiny English village of Scole, one of the most remarkable experiments ever attempted in communication with the dead took place in the cellar of this house. The Scole experimental group who conducted these experiments consisted of Diana and Alan Bennett, two of Britain's most accomplished mediums, as well as organisers and investigators Robin and Sandra Foy.
Hi, hello there.
Nice to see you.
For 5 years, twice a week, the group would meet in this tiny cellar. Here the Bennetts would go into trance, allowing what they say were the voices of the dead to speak through them.
Yes, we hear.
Hello. Come on, friend.
Come on, friends.
We can hear you starting.
But the Scole group went far beyond this, achieving spectacular results in a claimed form of spirit communication known as physical mediumship. Back at Scole, the phenomena were continuing to progress. The scientists were about to experience something even more shocking.
Another thing that happened was that a hand materialised and sort of glowed. And there was this disembodied hand floating around. When I told some of my friends about it, they said it sounded just like the Addams family. And I commented to the medium, I said, "Oh, I can see a disembodied hand." And she said, "It's not disembodied." This was Mrs. Bradshaw, who was speaking through one of the mediums. And I said, "You mean there's an invisible body attached?" And she said, "Precisely." And then she said, "Would you like it to touch you?" And I said, "Yes." So she said, "Well, ask it." So I said, "Hand, will you touch me?" And so the hand went round behind me and it tapped me on the shoulder.
But could these hands have been hoaxed? This visitor who felt the truncated length of a disembodied arm didn't think so.
And I was so startled, I moved my hand and it traveled right up a sleeve. There was a sleeve, like a cotton sleeve, very much like this, right up to the shoulder, and then it just stopped. There was nothing beyond where the shoulder would have been. It was a really amazing experience.
It's the same.
See the hand? Oh, yes, yes, oh, yes. You see the hand? Yeah, yes, the hand. Finger pointing. It stretches the finger to point. Finger pointing on the hand.
Oh, I see it, yes.
Sometimes we would be touched by these hands. Sometimes we would invite them to touch us. Sometimes they would touch us on our knees, let's say, or on our feet, which, as it was a fraud-proof table, were inaccessible to the mediums themselves.
So what's it like to touch one of these spirit hands?
It felt cool, but not cold. It didn't feel clammy, it didn't feel slimy. It felt like a normal human hand, and it grasped my hand firmly.
The unseen communicators told the scientists that they usually materialized a hand or an arm because it was easier than materializing a full body. But some cases of full bodies being materialized were reported.
I had the presence, the physical presence, of my mother, my father and my sister, all in solid form, standing in front of me, all of whom I was able to hold, to embrace, carry out conversations with them. I've witnessed it so many times, it just becomes a normal thing.
Normal is a word strained by the experiences of the Scole experiment. And there was nothing normal when patches of light floated over the scientists' heads and slowly changed into spectral forms.
The diffuse patches of light would take the form just of a human face, moving round the room with the direct voice, very, very faintly, coming from the diffused patch of light, and the lips moving, again, very faintly.
As I stared at the face, it was noticeably smaller than a normal size head. But within the face itself, features were clearly visible. We could see the glistening of the eyes, we could see the eyes moving.
And even more remarkable forms were to appear.
They looked like angelic forms.
Is that what's over my hands?
Oh my goodness, look at that!
And I was very fortunate that one came and landed on my hand. And just the energy that you felt from it when it connected with you was a lovely experience, and it just felt like an overwhelming feeling of love.
These were great experiences, you see. Again, I must stress, it changes your paradigm. You go in thinking none of this can be true, but after experience after experience after experience, it gradually dawns on you, hey, there's something going on here that we can't explain by normal scientific laws.
Darkness as an excuse to hide fraud. But participants to the skull experiment were not always in total darkness.
Whoa, look at you!
They were various shapes, generally like a pea-sized light, and it had substance. They would come and sit on your hand, you could feel them.
They were intelligently directed and intelligently moving, and would be responsive to our wishes, whether expressed or silent.
The gyrations were sometimes so rapid that it almost left like a circle of light going over here and over there. Sometimes two lights would appear and just stare at me within inches of my eyes.
I thought at first that the lights must be small light-emitting diodes suspended on the end of nylon fishing line.
Then suddenly a light would start to do a tap dance on the table, bouncing up and down on the table, and you could hear it click as it rebounded from the table, and suddenly it
went pop, went through the table and came out the other side. Now, no nylon fishing line explanation would account for it going through an apparently solid, well, it was a solid object, a table.
The debate about the authenticity and significance of this evidence continues to rage.
Now, according to science, when you physically die and when your brain stops functioning, that is it, that is the end.
The experiences that I've had have convinced me that it is very difficult to explain any of these things by an alternative explanation to that of survival.
You're not going to win everybody. I mean, you're not going to be able to ever have everybody believe that there's another side. That's just not going to happen.
I hope the significance of those experiments will literally be to make people think, to stop and think, and look at their own lives, to look at where they're going, perhaps to be better people.